Goeiedag, mijn naam is Evan, ik ben immigratie-procureur here in America, and ik wil jou help om immigratiewet te verstaan. Now, I'm making this video, and it kind of is going off of a YouTube short that Colonel Wyatt made, I believe it was yesterday, and I even mentioned this to him on WhatsApp that I was going to make a video about this, because I want to address the trolling or the negativity that is coming out on all of these channels that are dealing with, or at least in some level discussing, the Afrikaner Refugee program. And I say this for two reasons. One is I think a lot of these are actually bots and trolls, causing discord and anger and vitriol amongst the Afrikaner community concerning the refugee program is clearly designed at undermining the entire thing. So I do think that this is a concerted effort for some of these posts from groups who are just trying to simply undermine the program and really get into people's minds and headspaces and make them nervous or afraid or things like that. So I think that there's a motive and an agenda to some of them. However, on the flip side, I do think that there are some people, and I hate to use the term ungrateful, because, no one here in the United States is demanding gratitude for the Afrikaner Refugee Program. That's not the point I'm trying to make. It's not the best word to use, and I'm finding it difficult, and I think I'm a pretty articulate person, but I'm finding it difficult to express because I do understand the frustration that many of you are going through. I can't empathize with it because I can't begin to pretend that I know what it's like to live in a country where I'm being persecuted because of my race and I fear for my life. But of course I can sympathize with it. And I do. That's why this channel exists. And I've said that this is a safe space to post comments and all of that, unless it's really absurd. And I leave a lot of them for y'all to see. But again, if it's clearly a bot or a comment meant to just sow discord within the Afrikaner refugee asylee and the community that wants to stay inside Africa, I usually remove those comments. So that's really the first point. The second point is, getting back to this idea of gratitude, you have to remember, and I say this almost every video, this is not an entitlement. You are not entitled to refuge in the United States. You are not entitled to asylum if you're already here in the United States. The United States, as a sovereign nation, in its sovereign capacity, can do whatever it wants to protect admission or to allow admission into this country. And one of the things that we have done as a nation has adopted UN refugee laws and policies, created our own refugee policies, and created a program for, in this case, Afrikaners and other people of, other minorities, Bene South Africa, that are being persecuted because of their race, because of that immutable characteristic. So I just wanted to bring up this one comment, and I'm not attacking the person who posted it, but I do want to make it clear that comments like this are counterproductive, right? So the comment said, so how the heck can anyone prove that the violence against South African whites is because they are white? How do you do that? And this is in response to my video of proving persecution and connecting it to the nexus. You have to prove that that persecution you faced or you fear is directly connected to an immutable characteristic, in this case, it being your race, right? They go on to say, this has become ridiculous. It seems like they want to make this impossible for Afrikaners to go to the U.S., while the entire world knows by now that more than 100,000 whites have been murdered. The government hates whites and use underground organizations and individuals to murder whites. And what about all of the laws against whites? What does that say? Also, it's common sense by now that hate speech and calls for murder on whites are done on public platforms. There is so much information evidence, yet they try to make it hard or impossible for people. This program is a fraud. Okay? The last sentence is really what triggered me to make this video. The program is not a fraud. What you described is what the United States demands of everyone seeking asylum and everyone seeking to be a refugee. Now, yes, in other refugee programs in the past, depending on what category it is, the United States has declared that this group is deserving of refugee status. But that group still goes through a vetting process and an interview process. And doing my research and looking back, they still go to interviews with refugee officers. And those refugee officers still ask the question, have you suffered past persecution? Do you have a well-founded fear of future persecution? And it is still your obligation to tie that to a nexus, to make that nexus, to tie it to a protected ground. You're not special when it comes to the requirements and the standards for a refugee program or to be an asylee if you're already in the United States. And again, I'm not mad at this person. I understand their frustration. But when you say this program is a fraud, would you like it to be completely crafted and changed so specifically to Afrikaners that you get to do what no other refugee or no other asylee has ever had to do? Right? In fact, I'd argue that's already happened. Because if you remember, one of the first things President Trump did was shut down all refugee programs for all peoples back in January with one executive order. He then came out in February and asked through an executive order to create this program for Afrikaners. And Afrikaner refugees were coming over while other refugee programs were still paused and suspended while the United States revamps its immigration policy. And while the United States revamps its immigration policy, including the asylum process here in the United States, the Afrikaner refugee program is still going full speed and is still taking people and vetting people and interviewing people. So the frustration about having to prove the persecution because of a protected ground, I get it. It is one of the hardest things for us to do as immigration attorneys in the United States for our clients who are seeking asylum. Because look at all of the comments, and they're hard to read about, batteries and attacks and murders and break-ins. And my comment always back is, well, can you prove that it's because you're white or because you're not Afrikaner, that it's simply not because that South Africa is a failed state with a horrific crime problem? A failed state and horrific crime does not grant you the right to be a refugee or an asylee. Look at Central and South America. Look at many of the third world countries in the Middle East. If we opened the doors and the standard was only, are you a victim of crime that your country can't stop, we would be overrun with migrants. Heck, that's one of the reasons we have an immigration problem in the United States is people fleeing really crappy countries. But a really crappy country does not a refugee claim or an asylum claim make. It has to be connected to one of those protected grounds. So that frustration in this person's comment wasn't my problem. The comment was the end, that this program was a fraud. Because everyone before you in all of these programs has still had to have an interview, has still had to be vetted, and has still had to articulate the past persecution or the well-founded fear of future persecution. This is what the United States has decided are the requirements of this refugee program. This is what the United States has decided is the requirements of asylum seekers here in the United States. So to say that it's a fraud because you have to articulate, and by the way, words matter in law. Words matter in government. It doesn't say prove, it says articulate, which just means to describe. So to say that you're angry that you have to describe your past persecution and connect it to a protected ground, or why you fear future persecution because of your race, is frankly obnoxious. Because this is what everyone has had to do. So I again say that I don't know if this comment was just to agitate, if this comment was just to cause problems. I don't know. I have no idea. But many are. Many are. And many comments like this, again, it's not a gratitude thing, but President Trump could tomorrow decide to stop the program. And it's his right as the chief executive to do so. The next president, if this goes on for 3 years, can decide to end the refugee program. That's his prerogative or her prerogative to do so, right? This isn't an entitlement. So because there are hoops to jump through, I get that it sucks. I get that it's terrifying. I get that this process is scaring a lot of y'all because it's going on and on and on, but there are thousands of applicants for a program trying to give y'all relief and save you from persecution. So be patient, give it time. Again, there was no other point of this video than to except to address the fact that there does seem to be a lot of trolling in the comments. So just be aware of that as you watch these videos. Don't lose hope. The program is not a fraud. It's going full steam ahead, and it will help thousands upon thousands of people, Afrikaners and other ethnic minorities inside Africa, escape and flee persecution. But we've got to give it time. It's not a fraud, and to get angry that you are expected to do what every other applicant for a refugee program, again, with certain exceptions of them declaring groups and things like that, but even then they still go to interviews, what everyone before you has had to do from every other ethnic group or every other political group or every other refugee category that we have opened up programs for in the past, for you to be angry that you're being held to the same standards is just obnoxious, frankly. So there it is. I hope you remember to like, subscribe, share, consider becoming a member if you haven't. And, just stay tuned to the channel for daily refugee and asylee updates for Afrikaners. And, of course, remember, you do have to sit through videos about me politicking and other things that I like to talk about, but that's part of being a subscriber to the channel. So I will see you for the next video.